Hey, it's been over 4 months since I've been working on my own platform indie game. Today I'm sharing my first devlog and some useful tips with you all. Today we'll explore how I created my own background for my 2D game, which I have not even named yet. Although I can't provide a complete breakdown of the process of making a background, I'll share some useful tips that I learned along the way that can greatly enhance the look, feel and the visibility of your game. So first off, don't start with the colors. The first step is to create a basic grayscale foundation using a sketch, reference, inspiration or concept maybe. It's always a good idea to have a reference point, and as you go you will gain a better understanding of what should be included and what should be excluded from the final asset pack. By this you will strip away the distraction of the color. This allows you to focus solely on the composition, ensuring the elements that you're making fit the background without considering the color or increasing visual overload. Now second thing is visibility. I always begin by creating my background in grayscale because it helps me understand the visibility of my platform, characters and its interactable objects. The strategic use of the values not only enhance the visual depth of the background but are also commonly used by game developers to draw attention to specific points. Wider value create interesting depth in the background, helping create an effective distance in the background, as darker value create a focal point to guide players' attention to the point of interest. Hence, most games and cartoons use black stroke to make their target stand out from the rest of the background. This doesn't necessarily mean that you have to keep your interactable completely black. Instead, it implies that interactable should have darker value in contrast to the background. This leads us to our next point, which is use of stroke. You may have noticed many games use black or darker stroke to create a stylized feel or contrast between the background and the character or useful props. Personally, I recommend using stroke on elements that will be regularly interacted by the user to make them stand out from the decorative background elements, as overusing of stroke may lead to the background feel a little bit more cluttered. However, you may have noticed that I'm adding stroke to the shrubs or bushes. This is because I'm planning to add some interaction animation in future for them. Variation of assets. Now I do understand the game size and optimization of the assets are crucial in creating game art assets, but having a variation of assets helps your game look more believable, but it also gives you creative freedom as a level designer, since you can make levels for same theme without making them look repetitive. It's essential to keep in mind that Unity has built-in support for the atlases, and you can also use third-party software like Texture Packer for packing your textures. If you're not familiar with the atlases system, it's worth checking out on the Unity documentation. Personally, I use Texture Packer. It's a great tool for packing assets and it's super beginner friendly, so it's worth checking out. Now the next step is to have some sort of references, and using AI for concepts is a real time saver. As previously mentioned, having a strong concept art and reference is extremely important for establishing a foundation and mood board for your game's background. Even if you're not skilled in drawing, you can utilize resources such as Pinterest or Midjourney to assist you finding or refining your references. I mean, I can draw to some extent, but I'm not a professional artist. Therefore, I often rely on various websites to help me visualize my end product. I often use reference images to determine the shape and the color palettes. And yeah, it's a real time saver. Now the next two tips are the most important in my opinion. So far we talk about not starting with the color, visibility of the background, use of stroke, variation of assets, and AI for concept art. Now the second last one is going to be selecting the right color. When selecting the background color for your game, it's important to consider the theme and the setting. A fantasy world might benefit from the vibrant and colorful palette, while horror or industrial setting may require some sort of muty and earthy tones. It's crucial to ensure a clear contrast between the background and the foreground elements, especially the platform and the characters. This contrast improves the visibility and prevents visual confusion during the gameplay. Now you can use light colors for the background and dark colors for the foreground elements, and vice versa if your game style is different. Now this point is related to the values portion we previously discussed. Now each color have their own value, more on that on future videos. Now having a knowledge of color theory can be very helpful here, but it does require some degree of experience and understanding of the colors. Now the implementation of color theory also depends upon the type of the game you're going for. For example, if your game is colorful and vibrant like mine, it might be challenging to follow a strict color theory. But having a knowledge of how color works, it's always beneficial. We'll cover that in more future videos. Now the last but not least is going to be balancing the details. I've seen a lot of people making mistakes of adding too much or too little details in the background, which is not exactly what we're going for. You need to find some sort of balance. In my experience, adding too much details on objects which are in the distance is basically useless, so you don't have to do that. Instead, divide them into layers and apply a parallax effect that will look 100 times better. Another tip is to add minor or no details to the foreground elements as well, the elements which are really close to the camera. As adding too much details can make them draw a lot of attention, minor details will look just right on them. I also find that adding little details on the interactable items and character is not only going to make your game look more polished, but it's also going to give a clear direction to the player on what they have to do next. And most importantly, add details according to the style of the game you're going for. If your game has hard shadows, stick with that. And if your game has soft shadows, stick with that. You can't have every style in your game. Stick to one and balance it out. Another helpful tip which is related to this is avoid overzooming. As you overzoom, you will add unnecessary details which is not exactly what you're going for, so zoom according to the reference resolution you're going for. That's all from me. If you stay till the very end of the video, I really appreciate it. I will be updating my development journey along the way, so if you want to stay updated, you can subscribe to my channel. Bye!